In this video, we're going to look at fraction and mixed number addition and subtractions. Fractions must consist of the same size pieces in order to be combined with addition or subtraction. And that means they have to have the same denominators, because denominators tell you the piece size. Let's look at an example. We're going to add 1/3 of a pi to 1/2 of a pi. Now here we have 1/3 of a pi, and if we try to add it to 1/2 of a pi, we just can't combine them. If we take 1 and we add it to 1 to get 2 and add 3 to 2 to get 5, we get a nonsense answer of 2/5. So what we have to do is cut these pieces in the same size. We take the third pieces and cut them in half, and we make them into sixths. And when we do that, 1/3 turns into 2/6. We take the 1/2 piece and cut each of those into thirds, and the 1/2 piece turns into 3/6. We add 2/6 and 3/6 together to make 5/6. Now numerically what we did here is we took the 1/2 and multiplied the 1 by 3 and the 2 times 3. This was the process we called fraction building. And the 1/3 we took the 1 times 2 and the 3 times 2. And so the 1/2 becomes 3/6 and the 1/3 becomes 2/6, and when we add those together we end up getting 5/6. To add or subtract fractions, you must rewrite all fractions with a common denominator. That's important because the denominator tells you the piece size, and you can't add the pieces unless they're the same size. You may then add or subtract the numerators and place the result over the common denominator. Let's look at an example. Add 3/5 plus 5/16 and reduce to lowest terms. The first thing we have to do is find the common denominator. That happens to be the least common multiple of 5 and 16. And the way we find that common denominator, or one way, is just take multiples of the larger denominator, 16. If we go 16 times 1 times 2 times 3 and so on up to 16 times 5, we hit 80, and 80 is divisible by both 16 and 5, so 80 will work. So this means we have to build each fraction as an equivalent fraction in 80ths. Well, the 3/5 we have to multiply by 16. I know this because if we divide 80 by 5 we get 16. So we multiply 5 times 16 and then we multiply 3 times 16. The second fraction, 5/16, if we divide 80 by 16 we get 5. So we multiply the 16 times 5, and we also multiply the numerator 5 times 5. This gives us two equivalent fractions, 48/80 plus 25/80. We can combine the numerators together and write them over the common denominator, which is 48 plus 25 over 80, which gives us an answer of 73/80. Since 73 and 80 have no common factors, that is, numbers that divide into both, we can't reduce this anymore. So that's our reduced form, 73/80. In this next example, we're going to add three fractions. Add 2/17 plus 3/34 plus 1/4. Once again, we have to write all of those fractions with the same denominator, so we're comparing the same size pieces. We have to find the least common multiple of all three denominators. One easy way to do that in most cases is to take multiples of the largest denominator, in this case 34. 34 times 2 is 68. It turns out that 68 is divisible by all three denominators. 68 is divisible by 17 4 times. This means we have to take the fraction 2/17 and multiply by 4 in the bottom and 4 in the top. 68 is divisible by 34 2 times, so we have to take the fraction 3/34 and multiply by 2 in the bottom and 2 in the top. And 68 is divisible by 4 17 times, so we have to multiply the fraction 1/4 by 17 in the bottom and 17 in the top. So after we build these fractions, we get 8/68 plus 6/68 plus 17/68. Now we can add them together, and we do so just by adding their numerators, 8 plus 6 plus 17, and placing that sum over the common denominator of 68. And we end up with 31/68. And we can't reduce this fraction either because 31 is a prime number. Nothing divides into it except itself. Now let's look at a subtract problem. Subtract 5/32 minus 1/8 and reduce it. The least common denominator here is 32 because 32 is divisible by itself and it's also divisible by 8. So here we only have to build one of the fractions. We have to turn 1/8 into 32. Since 8 goes into 32 4 times, we multiply 1/8 by 4 in the bottom and 4 in the top, and that turns 1/8 into 4/32. So our new problem is 5/32 minus 4/32, which is 1/32, and we can get that by taking 5 minus 4 in the numerator, writing over the common denominator of 32. So the answer is 1/32. Now let's look at adding and subtracting mixed numbers. I have two methods. The first method that we're going to look at is where we just convert the mixed numbers to improper fractions. Then we add or subtract the fractions just like we did before. Here's an example. Add 2 3/5 plus 5 1/3. The first thing we have to do is turn each of those mixed numbers into improper fractions. If you remember, we take the whole number times the denominator and add the numerator, and place that result over the denominator. So 2 3/5, we take 2 times 5 is 10. We add 3, and that makes 13/5. For the second mixed number, 5 1/3, we take 5 times 3 is 15, and we add 1, and that makes 16/3. So our new problem is 13/5 plus 16/3. Now we have to find a common denominator. Well, 3 times 5 is 15, and 15 is divisible by both denominators, so that will work fine. So we have to build each fraction into 15ths. 13/5 we multiply by 3 and multiply by 3 to make 39/15. 16/3 we have to multiply the 3 times 5 in the bottom and the 16 times 5 in the top, and that makes 80/15. So our problem becomes 39/15 plus 80/15. We add 39 plus 80 in the numerator to make 119. We place that over our denominator of 15. Now 119/15 is the same as 7 14/15. We get this by dividing 119 by 15. And here's the division. 119 divided by 15. We see we get 7 with the remainder 14. So our mixed number is 7 14/15. Now let's look at an example where we subtract mixed numbers. Subtract 5 1/12 minus 3 2/15 and write the answer as a mixed number. Using method 1, we write 5 1/12 as an improper fraction. We take 5 times 12 is 60. We add 1, and that makes an improper fraction of 61/12. Our second mixed number, 3 2/15, we take 3 times 15 is 45. We add 2 and we get 47. So our second mixed number turns into 47/15. So our new problem is 61/12 minus 47/15. We need a common denominator here. We take multiples of our larger denominator 15. 15, 30, 45, 60. 60 is divisible by 12, so we can use that. So we have to rewrite each of those fractions as 60ths. We take the 61/12 and we multiply that by 5 in the bottom and 5 in the top. Why 5? Well, 60 divided by 12 is 5. We take our second fraction of 47/15 and multiply by 4 in the bottom and 4 in the top. And that is because 60 is divisible by 15 4 times. Now we have to do the multiplications. 5 times 61, if you do that multiplication, you'll get 305. We place that over 60. Our second fraction, 47 times 4, is 188, and we place that result over 60. So we have now two fractions with common denominators. We take the numerators and combine them with subtraction, and we get 305 minus 188 over our common denominator of 60, and that becomes 117 sixtieths. And we can convert 117 sixtieths into a mixed number by dividing 117 by 60 to get 1, and then do the subtraction, and we get a remainder of 57. So it's 1 and 57 sixtieths. Now we can reduce 57 sixtieths because both 57 and 60 are divisible by 3. 57 is divisible by 3 19 times, and 60 is divisible by 3 20 times. So we divide 3 out of the numerator and denominator. So our final reduced mixed number answer is 1 and 19 twentieths. A second method for adding and subtracting mixed numbers is to combine the whole number parts and then combine the fraction parts. And in subtraction, borrow from the whole number part if needed. And we'll see that in the second example. Our first example is to add two mixed numbers. Add 2 3/5 plus 5 1/3, and we're going to use this second method. The whole number parts are 2 and 5, and they add up to 7. The fraction parts are 3/5 added to 1/3. We need a common denominator. That happens to be 15. So we rewrite 3/5 and 15ths by multiplying by 3 in the bottom, 3 in the top. That makes 9 15ths. We rewrite 1/3 in 15ths by multiplying the bottom by 5 and the top by 5, and that fraction becomes 5 15ths. So then we add 9 15ths plus 5 15ths, and we get 14 15ths. We combine our fraction answer with our whole number answer, and we get 7 and 14 15ths. And when we used method 1, we got this exact same answer. In this second example, using method 2, we're going to subtract 5 and 1/12 minus 3 and 2/15. Now 5 minus 3 is 2, but 1/12 minus 2/15 results in a negative amount because 2/15 is a greater amount than 1/12. What we're going to have to do here is borrow, and they have a common denominator of 60. We get this just by taking multiples of 15. 15, 30, 45, 60. 60 is divisible by 12. So we rewrite both fractions with a denominator of 60. We take the 1/12 times 5 in the denominator, 5 in the numerator. That turns the 1/12 into 5 sixtieths. We take the 2/15 and multiply the 15 by 4 and the 2 by 4, and that turns it to 8 sixtieths. And here you can see for sure 5 sixtieths minus 8 sixtieths. That's a negative amount. We don't want that with mixed numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite 5 as 4 plus 60 sixtieths. Why that? Because 60 sixtieths is 1, and 1 plus 4 equals 5. We can do that. And then what we do is we add that 60 sixtieths to the 5 sixtieths. That's the borrowing process. We're taking 1 away from the 5, and we're converting it into 60 sixtieths and adding it to 5 sixtieths. This results in 4 and 65 sixtieths minus 3 and 8 sixtieths. Now we can take the 4 minus 3 is 1, and we can take the 65 sixtieths minus 8 sixtieths to get 57 sixtieths. And we can even reduce this answer. 57 divided by 3 is 19. 60 divided by 3 is 20. So we have a reduced answer of 1 and 19 twentieths. Now let's do a few examples where we add negative fractions. Let's start with the example add negative 3/5 plus negative 5 over 12. A good rule of thumb here is when you have a negative fraction, rewrite it as a negative numerator over a positive denominator. In this case, we can write negative 3/5 as negative 3 over positive 5. So our new problem is negative 3 over 5 plus negative 5 over 12. We have to find the least common denominator. We take multiples of 12, 24, so on, up to 60. 60 works as our common denominator. Now we have to build each fraction. We have to multiply -3/5 times 12 top and bottom because 60 divided by 5 is 12. We take 5 times 12 in the bottom and -3 times 12 in the top. That gives us a new fraction of -36 over 60. Our second fraction, we have to multiply top and bottom by 5 because 60 divided by 12 is 5. Multiply 12 times 5 in the bottom, -5 times 5 in the top. That gives us a new fraction of -25/60. Now we can combine these fractions together. We write the sum -36 plus -25 in the numerator over our common denominator of 60. Two negatives always add up to a bigger negative. In this case, -36 added to -25 makes -61 over our denominator of 60, so our final answer is -61/60. Now let's look at a second example where we have three fractions, and there's two subtract signs between three of the fractions. We have -3/4 minus 2/7 minus -1 over 3. We start by rewriting the -3/4 as -3 over 4. So we have -3 over 4 minus 2 over 7 minus a -1 over 3. Now we have to find a common denominator. We look at our largest denominator, 7, and start taking multiples of it. 7 times 1 times 2 times 3. And we have to go all the way up to 7 times 12 to get a common denominator of 84, and that happens to be our least common denominator. Now since 84 divided by 4 is 21, we take our first fraction, -3/4, and multiply the bottom by 21, the top by 21. That turns the first fraction into -63/84. Our second fraction, 84 divided by 7 is 12, so we have to multiply 7 times 12 and 2 times 12. So our second fraction turns into 24/84. In our final fraction, we divide 84 by 3 and it goes in 28 times, so we multiply 3 times 28 and we multiply the numerator by 28. This turns this third fraction into -28 over 84. Now we have three fractions, all with a denominator of 84. We can combine all the numerators together with the subtract signs. We have -63 minus 24 minus a -28. And remember, when you subtract a negative, we can write it as a positive. So we can write that as plus 28 at the end. Also remember that we can rewrite a subtraction as plus a negative. Remember, it's easier to add negative numbers than it is to subtract them. So we're going to rewrite this as a addition problem. We rewrite this as -63 plus -24 plus 28. Now we can combine all those together from left to right. -63 added to -24 is -87. And we still have to add that to 28. And -87 added to 28 makes -59. So our answer is -59/84. One final problem here. We're going to add two algebraic fractions. We're going to add 3 over k plus 5 over k, where k represents some real number. We would add these two fractions the same way we would add 3/11 plus 5/11 to make 8/11. Because k is the same in both fractions, we do have a common denominator, and k represents some real number. So we can just combine the numerators, 3 plus 5, and put them over our common denominator k. So our answer is 8 over k.